All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Jill Purce here with me on the show. Jill is a voice teacher, family constellations therapist, and author who pioneered the international sound healing movement through her rediscovery of ancient vocal techniques, the teachings of overtone chanting, the power of group chant, and the spiritual potential of the voice as a magical instrument for healing and meditation. Hello, Jill. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Brandon. Nice to meet you.
You know, it's so nice to have you on. It's such a beautiful, fascinating thing that never ceases to amaze me, the synchronicity of these things. You know, you and I were connected through a mutual friend who was on the show recently, Dan, just last night, I hadn't even, I was, who is my interview in the morning again? Oh, I'll see in the morning, And I was talking with my partner, Karen, who's been on the show before as well. And she's just completing her master's as a speech therapist. And we had a 20-minute conversation about someone here. I have a communal property called the Mystic Manor, and someone here and their voice. And she went deep down the rabbit hole of the voice and analyzing this person's voice and, what it was sort of indicating to her. And I mean, probably the deepest conversation we've had. And then, I wake up first thing or bright and early. And what am I going to talk about? It's you. So interesting. It really is. It's really fascinating, isn't it? It never ceases to amaze me. So I'm going to start off with the same opening question I always like to start off with. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Oh, my God, is what I say. My passion is finding different ways of bringing people into presence. And over the years, I've developed a number of those. Because we spend most of our time using any signal, smell, taste, touch event in life to signal us to regret what we forgot to do in relation to it, and therefore anticipate what we have to do in relation to it. So it kicks off a kind of cycle of regrets and dreads, which keep us away from the present. And so all the things that I've done in my life, and I'm deeply passionate about, is finding exciting ways of bringing people into presence. And so I've done that in every which way I possibly can.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. We definitely passed the 10 floor mark, but that's okay. That's the Willy Wonka. That's the Willy Wonka answer, as I like to call it, and where you blast into the cosmos, into the stratosphere as you elevator leaves the building. But so the other thing I would like to hear from you, if you would, is whatever you feel is relevant regarding your backstory. I'm sure there's a lot to share in there. I know one of your books you wrote the year I was born. So, I'm sure there's lots of backstory going on there. But I would love to hear whatever you feel, is most relevant for me and the listeners to know and understand.
Okay, well, I've always been very interested in how form comes into being. And so I started really asking the questions about that because I knew that this was not understood. We had no idea about how form comes into being. And so I started by looking at the spiral as a record of its in nature. The spiral in nature as an object of as a record of growth in time, like shells. You can see, the ammonite shell, you can see the windows going back, and it leaves a record of itself in time. And so I became very interested in spiral, the dynamics of the flows of water, hydrodynamics, for example, where when the onward flow is interrupted by something, then the eddies turn around and become independent objects. And so you have the same formation in nature. And so that started me off on this whole investigation of the spiral as a question of the universe. It didn't matter where I went in the universe, the spiral led me to really fundamental issues. And it was the journey of the soul. It's our journey to the divine. But I did a research fellowship with Maurice Wilkins, who was one of the three who got the Nobel Prize for discovering DNA. And so I worked in his lab for a year, looking at the sort of integrative nature of it all. And so the mystic spiral was the mystical aspect of this. It started off really looking at spirals in nature and spirals in every way. And then I just did a small excerpt of that, which is the mystic spiral, which I wrote in, which was published in I forget now, is that the year you were
74.
born? 74. Yes. I know, it's quite astounding, really. And then this led me on to seeing that another way that we translate spirit into matter is through sound. And this was something I saw the work of a Steiner doctor, a student of Rudolf Steiner, a doctor called Hans Jenny, who had a film showing the effect of introducing formless, seamless liquids and solids and viscous liquids onto vibrating plates, and then vibrating them with all kinds of different sounds, and then you, before your very eyes, you can see form coming into being, and so I realized that sound is completely fundamental to the beginning and this translation of spirit into matter, and this correlates with all the stories of creation. In the beginning was the word, which is the sound, or
Right.
in the Dogon tradition, it's the first 7 vibrations of Ogata Mele. And so in every tradition, in the Hindu tradition, the sound before the Om is the Ur sound, and so on. So in all these traditions, the beginning of anything is sound. And so I became absolutely fascinated with sound. And so I really went from my work on spirals to being able, as I said at the beginning, I wanted to really induct presence for people, and so I started doing workshops where I could introduce them to the means of their being present, and that was sound itself. Because if you're chanting, you can only chant in the present. You can't chant in the past, you can't chant in the future, but you can chant in the present and think about something else. So if you chant in the present, the key to the work is listening to the sound that you're making while you're making it. So you have a kind of circuit of attention. So as soon as you're making a sound, you're listening to the sound that you're making, you can only be present. And so no longer in this timeline of regrets of the past and dreads of the future. So then I started to think, if I'm going to get people chanting together, which of course people aren't doing, because when I started doing this a long time ago, you couldn't join a choir unless you could read music, unless you could sing in tune. You'd have to have an audition, and so it was very difficult, and people were disaffected. The professionals had hijacked sacred music, and so people didn't like to make sound. They thought they had to have professionals do it and then put earphones in so they could, hear it from somebody else.
Right.
So it was really taken away from them. So I wanted a way of really bringing them back to discovering their own voices, whether or not they could sing. So I wanted something which would be equally fascinating for people who could sing and did sing, and even professionals and great divas, and people who couldn't sing or had been told they had to stand at the back and mouth it. And so I looked at the very sort of fundamental nature of sound, and what I found was this form of chanting from Central Asia, which is a form of chanting where you chant on a single note, and by changing the shape of the resonant cavity, you amplify the harmonics of the sound. And this is very, very profound, because actually the sound that you then hear, these notes, these pitches that you hear, are in tune in a way that they aren't in modern Western music, because modern Western music is out of tune. So one of the things that happened in the 17th century with the popularity of keyboard instruments was that the tuning system had to be redone, rejigged, because traditionally you tuned an instrument by going from a note to its fifth. So 5 notes above, and then 5 notes above that, 5 notes above that, known as the cycle of fifths. And what happens when you do that is, when you should reach the octave, you're actually overlapping it. So you're not actually an octave above where you should be. And so in order to, it's called the Pythagorean comma, this quarter of a semitone, So what the musicians did in the 17th century was to take this interval and put it back into the octave, so that all the intervals in the octave are either too long, too stretched, or too small. So all music since Bach is out of tune, and
Wow.
had to have this fudge factor. So I call it a Faustian bargain. We'll make all our music out of tune, and look what we can do with it. So the overtones that I found, that I discovered in Central Asia, and also I then worked in. I spent several years working in Germany with a very well known German composer called Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, and he had written a piece for this kind of music with 6 singers doing a very simple form of vocal overtones. And so I was really. He was in modern Western art music induction into this chant, and on the other hand I had the Tibetans, who I'd been studying with for 45 years or so. So I had these 2 streams, the Tibetan stream of doing it and Stockhausen, the Western art music. And so this is a very fascinating way of chanting, and maybe I should demonstrate it. I could just give you an example.
I would love an example. Yes, I know the listeners would too.
So I'll do it solo, and then I'll play a group doing it together, because for me the exciting thing is group chant, everybody coming together and using their voices together. So but I'll do it singly first, and then together.
Wow, that came from you.
That was me. That was me.
Incredible.
So now I'll play you a group of us doing this together, and this is what I get people doing. This is what I teach them to do.
Okay. How cool. So when you're leading these chants, I mean, what do you find? Well, one, how long of a time period do you typically do this in the group? And then what do you find is sort of the effect to the group of doing so?
Well, the interesting thing about what you're hearing is that we're actually chanting on one note, but you're hearing all kinds of other notes as well. And these are very ephemeral. They sound like the bells. They sound very pure. And so when people are chanting this, it has a very powerful effect, because not only are they being in this circuit of attention, not only are they making sound and listening to the sound they're making, but the sound that they're making are their own geometry made audible, because these intervals are related to our inner structure, and so you're hearing what we are. You're hearing what you are. And at the same time, when you chant together with other people, you dissolve the boundaries between you. And because sound creates form and dissolves form. And so one of the magics of chanting together with other people is that you dissolve the boundaries between you, and you immediately create a kind of homogenized group, a sort of group presence, which is extremely powerful and magical.
Wow. Yeah, I'd imagine it's almost like and of course, I've been involved on a very small scale. I've never been to a workshop all on chanting, but certainly have done like very short intervals of this sort of thing, where people are oming or what have you. And I got to imagine for a long period of time, it really creates almost like an altered state sort of like doing a plant medicine in a group would, maybe in a milder way. But I'm sure you've seen some really interesting things over the years from navigating
Yeah,
everyone into this state.
absolutely. I mean, it has a very similar effect to plant medicine. I mean, it increases our serotonin and endorphins and reduces our cortisol. So all the same kind of brain chemistry is activated as is activated by plant substances. So it's a way of getting very high without having to ingest something externally. And it's very interesting. Plant substances are these external things that you put inside, whereas making sound is coming from the inside outside. So you don't have to actually objectify something and then ingest it. So
Right.
I think it's more interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely more organic, right?
Yeah,
It's as close to home
definitely.
as you can get.
Well, it absolutely, yeah. It's our own sound, yeah.
Yeah. I love how you said it sort of is sharing the blueprint and geometry of the person emanating, which is a fascinating, you know, concept that I never really considered.
It's a way of sort of inducting health into the system, because if you're constantly being out of tune, if you're singing out of tune, if you're chanting out of tune, if you're listening to music that's out of tune, it's not very out of tune, so we don't know that, we don't notice it, but it is. So it means you're being held in a kind of dissonance with the world that you're inhabiting. Whereas
Yeah.
if you do this, you're in harmony and in balance, and that means you can be well, you can be sound in mind and body, and not highly strung or out of tune.
Yeah, I've noticed in recent years a lot of people in the, that are making music in sort of the spiritual community, if you will, that are realizing this and actually changing the frequency of the music and sort of notating it, when they put out music. Have you seen this and become aware of this? I assume.
I'm not quite sure what you mean. What?
Well, like for example, if I go to someone's, let me just pull it up real quick. Like going to a friend's music and he'll have like my friend D-Rock here has on his song "Breath of Fire" and then in parentheses 320 hertz. Or positive resonance, and then he has it in 528 hertz.
Oh, okay.
So I've noticed a trend towards people,
Yeah. No, I'm not so interested in doing that. I think it's just another distraction from the real thing.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I think it's much more important to do it really without trying to think about what's the speed of the vibration that you're actually making, how does it relate to this, much better to actually just do it with the whole point is not to think, whereas if you're thinking about how many hertz you're doing, you're making. Whereas if you're actually doing it, the whole point is to go beyond thought into the present. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're trying to think, well, I'm doing this or doing that, then you're being distracted once more.
Mm-hmm. So I guess then that leads me to the question, what would someone making music do to remove the dissonance that has been sort of baked in since the 1700s, as you put it?
17th century, well, 1600s.
Or 17th century, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a very, very good example of it. I mean, in fact, this is the only form of, the only real way I know of doing that, of overcoming this out of tuneness of music. Because when you chant on a single note and you amplify these vocal cavities, the notes that you hear, they're called harmonics. They are completely in tune. And so this is the only way that we have of actually being in tune vocally and musically. And so this is why I'm so keen on it. And the nice thing is that it's a fascinating, you have to really learn it. It's not something you can just do. I have taught 11-year-old boys. They're the exception to the rule. Often they can do it, but most people, you do have to teach them. It is a method you have to teach, whether even if they're singers, and especially if they're singers, actually, because they're used to singing in a particular way. And so what's exciting about this is that musicians are as equally fascinated by it as people who've never sung in their lives before, and don't know what they're doing. And so it takes you right across the spectrum of music, of people being musically informed or not at all.
Yeah. But so, just so I'm clear, are you saying then that if someone's making any sort of modern music, there's no way to make it, to make it in tune aside from chanting, or is there with this technique they can sort of adjust their singing or adjust the music that they're maybe producing either with a traditional instrument or even electronically?
Well, I mean, all traditional instruments have this tuning problem,
Right.
and since they all have to play together, they all have to be in. They all have to have the same problem in a sense. They all have to be out of tune. Electronically, you can make them in tune. That's for sure. But what I should say is that it's much more important to sing and not worry about being out of tune than not to sing. It's just that if you want to really be in tune, then you need to do this. But I'm not saying, I also sing classically, and my husband plays the piano, and so it's glorious as well. And I love opera, and my son Cosmo is quite a well-known musician, and so I come from a family of musicians. My mother was a concert pianist, her brother was a composer, so embedded in music of all kinds. And so any music is good music, is good, really. Well, I don't know about any music is good, but
Yeah, that may be questionable. To someone, it's good, right?
Yeah, right.
So, you referenced your husband, and he is well known, Rupert Sheldrake, for this concept of morphogenic fields. Is that sort of how you guys came together originally? Is because over
Well,
that
it's kind of
his work there?
interesting. I mean, it's very interesting because when I mentioned at the beginning, I was looking for, I was interested in the way form comes into being. And quite independently, that was what we were both looking for the same thing, actually, before we met each
Right.
other. And then we met each other in 1982 at a conference in Bombay called Ancient Wisdom and Modern Science. And I was talking about ancient wisdom, and he was talking about modern science. And he was living and working in India at the time, and he just came up and so that's how we met, actually. So our work is very congruent. I mean, he talks about resonance as a metaphor, really, whereas I'm talking about resonance in reality. And so our work is very congruent, and also with the family constellations. People who are interested in family constellations are very interested in his work. So our work ties together very, very well. And actually, it's interesting. Our whole family is now. So Cosmo, that I mentioned, Cosmo Sheldrake is a very great musician, and his so we're all at it, actually, and I keep getting emails from people saying, what an amazing family, you're all doing these things. So Cosmo, at his latest, he was the sound of the iPhone ad a year ago, and so that blasted him into the stratosphere. And then he was going to make music for Cirque du Soleil, except in the COVID they went bust, so so they don't exist anymore. And so his latest album is called Wake Up Call, and he's using the songs of birds and transforming them into music, particularly the birds of endangered species.
Oh, wow.
So he makes glorious music and also very happy music. And then my son Merlin, my eldest son, who just got married yesterday, actually.
Oh, wow. Congratulations, Merlin.
He just brought out a book, Entangled Life, which is about the whole mycelial universe, which has taken the world by storm. So he was under the radar forever and a day, and then suddenly he wrote this book, which is hilarious, brilliant, life-changing, and beautifully written. So all four of us are sort of working in a way very relatedly. To help change the world to be a better place.
Wow. The all-star family there you got going on. Yeah, I think your husband, I'm aware of course, just high level what your husband known for sort of morphic resonance and morphogenic fields, and which is essentially the idea that each take a spoon, there's a non-physical field that sort of holds that in place. Am I in a layman way explaining that correctly?
It's really to do with things being able to. I mean, for example, a sort of classic thing is people. The more people who ride bicycles, the easier it is to ride bicycles. So when something has been done by other people or other animals at a distance, it becomes easier to do. So that's one example. For example, yeah, yes.
Gotcha. I see. Okay. Well, very, very fascinating. I'd like to ask you a little bit more, or hear a little bit more from you on the mystic spiral, and this, the mystic spiral subtitle is Journey of the Soul. And, I've seen it said before. I actually pulled it up here, and maybe it even came from your book. I don't know. It seems like maybe it would. It's a meme that says the path isn't a straight line; it's a spiral. You continually come back to things you thought you understand and see deeper truths. And I've seen it many times over the years, and I always I really love it. And I'm curious, sort of the journey of the soul aspect of your work, if that is I'm seeing where it's actually who this it's actually being attributed to Barry Gillespie, it looks like, that particular quote. But yeah, so just curious what you think about that.
I could have said it. I might have said it even more elegantly, however. But no, I'm joking.
Of course you did, Jill. Of course.
But yes, but that's the point of the book, but it's also very visual. So it's a very beautiful book. It shows the spirals from different cultures and how they represent this journey of the soul. And really, in a way, it's getting off the mortal coil, as Shakespeare called it, onto the sort of central axis. But yeah, we're constantly coming round again and understanding things more and more. That's definitely the journey.
Yeah.
My work. I mean, one of the things you were talking about Rupert, and I was saying that one of the ways that our work really converges is to do with the family constellations, and I mean, this is something I've been doing not quite as long as the sound. I mean, I've been working with sound, I dread to think, it's for 45 years or something, and one of the things I started doing many years ago is I started doing these ceremonies for people to go back and honor their ancestors. And then I started noticing quite remarkable things were happening. The people were ringing up, "What are you doing? This is amazing." So then I gradually developed it more and more specifically, and now I do what's called family constellations. And this is based on the idea that there's a kind of knowing field, an ancestral field or soul of the family. And whenever there's any kind of interruptions in any generation going back, early deaths, suicides, emigrations, adoptions, abortions, suicides, death in childbirth, dodgy dealing, injustices, abuse, accidents, incarcerations, mental illness, physical illness, anything which interrupts the idea of a normal development of a life, causes a kind of pattern of trauma which is tremendously stable, and then goes down transgenerationally and visits itself upon whoever's available in any generation, and that person then finds themselves being exiled from the family, being excluded in some way, and sometimes following in a very similar way. These patterns and these intergenerational traumas visit themselves on subsequent generations, and so subsequent generations, whoever happens to be available, finds themselves excluded from the field, exiled from the field, or following quite directly what happened to the earlier generation, even if they don't know that person existed, even if they know the person existed but they don't know what happened to them, or even if they neither know the person existed or what happened to them. And so this is extraordinary work, and so it's really about unfinished business. And so until COVID, I was doing this in real life, and now I'm doing it online, and I'm finding doing it online absolutely fascinating, because in a sense, we're working outside of space and time anyway, because we're looking at the family through time, and we're looking through at the family through the eyes of multiple members, which we never normally do. And so, it's happening outside of space and time. So whether we do it online or in reality, it seems to be work equally well. But in reality, I have people choose people, naive representatives from the group to represent their family members. And the magical thing is that when you choose somebody, and I could do this online as well, when you choose somebody to represent somebody, your mother, your siblings, or your father, or whatever, they become that person.
I've heard this.
And it really is extraordinary. And when I saw this most extremely was when my son Cosmo did a workshop with me for the first time. I had these two brothers who'd worked with me a lot. And one in particular, he was doing his PhD at Cambridge on music, and so he was doing it all my workshops and every kind. And his brother was the vulnerable one, and they were both in the workshop together. And he chose my son Cosmo to represent his brother, who was in the room. And I could see Cosmo had never done this before. And he's rather a cheery person, Cosmo, and I could see him slumping and sort of collapsing, and then I could see his rational mind. If you had a son for 30 years, you know them very well, and I could see his rational mind kicking in and saying, "This is ridiculous, I'm Cosmo," and sort of standing erect, and then crumpling again, and I could see this person who he's representing watching him, fascinated, and then his rational mind kicking in again. "Oh, it's ridiculous, I'm Cosmo," and so he would go from being this other person and collapsing and sort of, being this person who was sort of crumpled inside.
So different than himself.
Totally different from himself, and then finally letting go and realizing it's okay, and then becoming that person. So that's what happens. The rational mind says no, this is ridiculous, but then if you let go of the rational mind and you go into it, you become that other person. And so you have these people, these representatives, representing your mother and father and siblings, and then I bring in whoever else is relevant. And so you see the family, and I do this online, as I say, and in a miraculous way. And I do it ceremonially as well, and I do it with chant, because that's my way. And so you're able to gather up the outliers. So if somebody's abused you, the temptation is to cast them out into outer darkness, is to not speak to them and have nothing to do with them and cut the ties with them. And if you do that, then you blame yourself and punish yourself, and then you suffer. And it's only when all these people, including the abusers and the injustices and the transgressors and all these difficult people in your generation or previous ones, it's only when you honor them, when you honor the perpetrators, it's only when you bring them back into the field so they can take their rightful place, that everybody feels good. And it's miraculous. And what's so interesting, that this work is coming back to science. Again, for example, the hot subject in the life sciences is this thing called epigenetics. And I mentioned in the beginning, I worked with Maurice Wilkins, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering DNA with Watson and Crick. And then it was thought that the only things that were inheritable were coming through the DNA. But before that, and again now, people like Darwin and Lysenko and Lamarck and people, and now people more and more are realizing that the learning of acquired characteristics, so things that you acquire during your lifetime become heritable. And they found this work out, particularly dealing with the Holocaust, racial injustices. So the Holocaust, the movement of Finns to Sweden during the war, or the famine in Holland after the war, or Ireland. So all these major sort of societal disruptions. What they found was that for several generations, the descendants of these people suffered mental illness and physical and chemical changes. And there's a
Wow.
wonderful example of this. The best experiment really is called the inheritance of fear in mice, which was done at the University of Atlanta about 5 or 6 years ago, where they took mice and gave them an electric shock while subjecting them to a very innocent smell, flour like almonds, called acetone phenone. And so I mean, I don't believe in giving electric shocks, but anyway, this is what they did. And so they smelt this very delightful smell while receiving a kind of pain. And then they bred these mice in vitro so that they wouldn't meet their descendant mice. And they found that the children mice and the grandchildren mice all were terrified of the smell.
Wow.
So the inheritance of acquired characters, this is called, and this is exactly what we find. The curse and the blessing. So the person who finds themselves following an earlier member is the person who can heal it, and so it becomes the blessing. So
Right.
this unfinished business is absolutely fascinating, and I love this work, and I'm doing it online now, and I find it works just as well online as it does because I have these avatars. So when I have representatives on the screen, I also have a screen of I have a window also of avatars, and I move them around as I'm told to by the representatives, and it's
Wow.
quite extraordinary.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I'm curious as to, how do you think, like, for example, Cosmo was taking on this person who, in this case, happened to be there witnessing him representing, Cosmo representing himself. I've heard about this before where it's like, oh, now represent my dead grandfather who did this thing to me or whatever. And of course, as you have stated, they take on these attributes. I mean, how do you think this is happening from a strictly, setting the intention, behind the scenes, spiritual centric, method that we don't necessarily understand, but just seems to work? Or
I know. I mean, I absolutely, nobody understands how or why. I mean, we have absolutely no way of knowing. It's completely baffling. I mean, there's no, we're tapping into, and it's like, somebody in the playground, when, how children tap each other on the playground and say, you're it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's a bit like that, you're my grandmother, and you become. I have no idea how it works. It's complete. Nobody does. It's absolutely baffling. But the other thing is that when you become a representative for somebody else, you often find that the person that you're representing has an issue which you need to work on as well, and that's uncanny as well. The whole thing is uncanny.
The layers of connectivity are baffling, right?
And also, who comes? I mean, I've been working in groups for as long as I can remember, and groups are fascinating. And so, who comes together at a particular time in place? Well, in cyberspace at the moment, but why people are drawn together in a particular configuration, because each time I do this, the themes, you have these current themes, and people say, yeah, this is so similar to what happens to me, or this happens to me, or every workshop has a different theme. It's completely mind-blowing and
Wow.
profoundly healing. And the thing about our issues, our problems, our kind of crazinesses, they are laid down in such deep layers of the unconscious that we have absolutely no access to them at all. And so talking therapy, in my opinion, gets nowhere, because talking is on the level of the rational mind, and these issues that we have are so much deeper than the rational mind that the rational mind can't access them. Whereas with this kind of work, because you're actually seeing the family, you're seeing it physically moving, you see the members of the family moving through time, through space, through the eyes of different members. You're seeing the whole gestalt of the family unfolding, and you get it. You're drilling down deep into the unconscious, and the effect is dramatic on people's lives.
Yeah.
And
That was
instantaneous.
going to be my next question.
Well, one of the things that happens, I mean, I have this happen many, many times, but one time it was particularly sort of extreme. Was a woman came back after the weekend and said, "You're not going to believe this. I'm staying with my mother. I normally live in the country. I'm staying in London to do this." And she's been estranged from her 6 brothers and sisters for 25 years. While we were working yesterday, every one of them telephoned.
Wow.
So you're really bringing in the outliers. You're making the field conscious. You know, the whole field of the family and ancestors, the whole soul of the field, the whole soul of the family is becoming is lit up, and there's a kind of induction of order. You're bringing order into the system.
Wow.
And order is enlightenment. Order is health.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say the person passed down with the trauma, let's say, from their, ancestor, maybe they know, maybe they don't know. It's sort of their, you talked about how it will find who in the DNA line is alive and sort of make itself, known or present or felt. Would you say that is more as an opportunity than a curse, if you will, for the person who is dealing with it to sort of transmute and bring healing to it then?
Well, firstly, I think it's outside the DNA, so just a little
right. Gotcha.
Perhaps reference to that, but I think that's what's so interesting about it is it outside of DNA. But
right.
But the curse and the blessing are always the same,
Yeah.
The
two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. So the very fact that it visits itself upon us means that we have this ability. Well, it's not only an ability, it's actually a responsibility. We all individually have a responsibility to transform this. And if we do that, then it doesn't go down to our children or to our indirect descendants, whichever way it goes. If we don't deal with it ourselves, it goes on down the generations, generation after generation. And if we do deal with it, our life is transformed completely. And I have people who, it's very literal sometimes. I mean, somebody joined my online one that I did, the previous one, and I worked with her years ago. And when I worked with her, she was desperate to find a partner and have children. And now, several years later, this is about 5 years later, she's now found her. She said, as a result of working with you, I found my partner and I've got 3 children. And so people, their lives changing in quite literal ways. So people come with intentions. I always ask people at the beginning, what is their pain, what is their intention, and what people ask for happens. It just is extraordinary, quite literal. Yeah. So not only is it psychologically healing, emotionally healing, but it's physically, it brings about one's intentions and physical desires in ways which are hilarious sometimes and magnificent in others.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear. I mean, is there any other sort of story from, one of these sessions, family constellation sessions, that sticks out to you that'd be maybe fun to share? I mean, I remember when I first heard about this work, someone telling me that they saw like a, 5-year-old girl acting like this person's grandfather in the funniest way, And so I'm just curious, as long as you've been doing it, I'm sure you have countless stories, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that comes to mind that would be fun to share.
Well, I want somebody who's worked with me a lot. It's really his sort of therapy. One time he came with his sister and her husband and her husband's mother. And they came back the next day after the first day, and it was again the same thing. It's classic, you're not going to believe this, but that's what they always say.
Yeah.
So the brother-in-law had been working, and the vulnerable one in his family was very much his sister, who really his session was somehow he really wanted to help his sister. And so that night he spoke to his sister, and she said, "What on earth were you doing? What was going on?" I was having dinner with a friend. We were just we were going to go and see a movie, and we were having dinner, and she was sitting opposite me, and she said to me, "My goodness, what's happening to you? You're changing. You look different. You're changing before my eyes."
Wow.
And as we were working, this in a totally different part of the world, his sister was literally physically transforming.
Wow. Wow.
It's so
As
literal.
in,
I mean,
it's yeah. I
magic.
mean, as in even the physical features
Yeah.
were
Even the
looking
physical features.
different.
She was transforming from a somehow depressed, burdened person into a joyful, luminous being before
Wow.
their friends' eyes.
Wow. And yet she was not herself involved in the sessions. It was the
No, she
brother
had
on
no
her
idea.
behalf.
She had no idea that her brother was doing the work or even anything. She knew
Wow.
nothing about the work at all.
How fascinating. It really is absolutely fascinating to
It's miraculous.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it's makes it's so clear that the interconnectivity of all of us, and of course especially those that you are familiar your family and familial ties. I mean, have you ever seen this? Can it work with someone who's my dear friend since childhood? You know what I mean? Who's, let's say, chosen family as opposed to genetic family.
Well, no, I think you have to. It has. I don't. Well, yes. I mean, you can work with systems. Actually, no. I mean, of course you can. Yes, you can. You can use this method really for anything. But when you're doing the family work, you can't really work with another person. That's what I was really getting at. So, for example, if you want to work with your, say you're married, for example, and you want to work with your partner's family, then if you've got children together, then you can do it because you work.
Yeah.
I either work with the birth family, somebody's family of origin, or their current family, their new family. People. So if you're working with a current family, then if you have children together, then you can work with the husband or the wife. But you can use this system this is a way of looking at anything. A business or any undertaking. It's quite extraordinary how it functions. Yeah.
Now, is there, as far as someone wanting to sort of experiment with this and learn this, obviously you have your online workshops. Have you written any books, or is there, information out there on, hey, do this at home on your own kind of thing? Or is it something that really requires guidance?
For me, you can't really do it on your own. The whole point of this is actually that I mean, I can do it individually with people, but I much prefer to do it in a group because you have other people representing your family members. And
Oh,
that's
right.
the point.
Right.
I mean, the best. I haven't written about it. No, but I have a lot of interviews about it on my website. So I would really encourage people to go to the website, which is called healingvoice.com. Healing Voice is one word, healingvoice.com. And I've got lots of interviews and lots of things on there about it. And I'm also doing these online. I mean, the nice thing about working online is I have people from Australia, from West Coast America, from East Coast America, from all over Europe, South America. I mean, people travel when I do it physically from all over the world to work with me. I mean, that is extraordinary too. But this way we can do it from all over the world without traveling. And that, of course,
Right.
is what we need at the moment because of all the pollution. So it is miraculous how at any one moment, people are all over the world. So anyway, the people can go to my website, and on the home page, I have an announcement of these online workshops. My physical ones are up there, but they all say postponed
Yeah.
because we can't meet physically like that. But both the Healing Voice online, which I've got one coming up on the 7th and 8th of November, and then I just finished a family constellation online, so the new dates aren't up there yet. But I'm going to do it either the 5th and 6th of December or the 12th and 13th, and people can email me. It's info@healingvoice.com. Again, it's on the website, but info@healingvoice.com will get to me, and I can let them know. But they can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter, and then as soon as the new dates are up there, they can sign up either on Eventbrite or calling me or giving me the number to call them or whatever. But that's the best
Wonderful.
I can recommend, really, because it's not really something you can. You need another person. It's not something you can do for yourself, because you need somebody to help with this overview, through space and time, and for some reason I have this in my gift. I see the connections, and I'm able to do it, which is amazing, really. And in order to do this work too, you have to have there's no judgment. So it doesn't matter how dastardly somebody's been. It doesn't matter if they've murdered somebody. I mean, of course, it matters at the time, but
Right.
it's not. There's no judgment about this work. You're working with what is, and you're just honoring the perpetrator, or bringing people back into relation. It's not. There's no judgment about it at all, and so. It's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely amazing. And, I guess as we sort of begin to wind down here, is there, you've done so much interesting, fascinating, groundbreaking work over the years. Is there anything in particular that, through all of this that obviously your workshops would be great for people to attend, but just insight or wisdom from you that you would care to share with, the listeners?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I tell you one thing which I found very helpful is to make a family altar. I spent time in the early 80s in Japan, and in those days everybody had a family altar. Because it was patriarchal and traditional culture, the family altar was related to the last male head of the family, and so fresh rice would be made every day. What he liked to drink would be put out there. It's activated every day. But not being patriarchal, mine is completely sort of it has both sides of my family on it. But it's something really good because it's a physical entity which you can use to activate. So you can have a little bell or light a candle or burn some incense, and every day honor them. The thing is, people no longer living need to be remembered. In armistice, we have these societal ceremonies, to remember the war dead in England,
Right.
Remembrance Sunday and so on. And things we say is, we will remember them. These are the classic words, we will remember them. So this work is, remember, the word to remember means to gather up the dismembered bits, and to recollect.
Remember, right?
Exactly, and to recollect is the same, to collect the bits that have been dispersed. So we will remember you. So we know, society at its most widest sense knows that the dead or the ancestors need to be remembered, and so this is very important. And actually, somebody was telling me about this Disney film Coco, which I'm not a great fan of Disney, but I must say the film Coco really is very interesting. It just shows when at the Festival of the Dead, at the beginning of November, they put the photographs of the ancestors on the altars, and if they don't, then the ancestors kind of go off somewhere. There's no connection anymore, and it's a rather wonderful film, actually. Anyway,
Wow.
so the importance of honoring your ancestors, and one of the things that happened in this tsunami in Japan in 2011 was that the ancestors were orphaned because they're the people they were looking after. Because one of the if you honor ancestors, and you bring all these outliers into view, as it were, then their role is to help the living remain living. That's the job description of an ancestor, if you like. But they can't do it unless you remember them and honor them. So if you have a family altar that you activate regularly, then the ancestors, once remembered, are able to help the living remain alive. So I recommend making a family altar, somewhere in your house.
Great recommendation. I think that's, I think of my mother's house where she has pictures of the family everywhere. And, I like the idea of even taking that sort of idea, and making it even more distinct and focused. And you're saying with the family altar to have focus primarily on those that have passed, or those that are, the oldest in your line, if you will, or
no, an
both?
ancestor to qualify as an ancestor, you have to be dead.
Okay, so only
So it has to be. It
okay.
has to be those who've passed. Yes. So it's all the members of your family who've passed, and if you've got little photographs of them, put them up. I mean, I do a weird thing. I had my children's teeth and my cat's whiskers up there. All my sacred little objects I sort of put up there. But essentially,
Cool.
I have photographs as far back as I can on both sides, and little offerings and sacred things, and activate them with sound and with light, and chant their names. That's always a good thing. Chant their names and honor them.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I always, as I'm winding down, I always ask a story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. I feel like I could let you off the hook because you've shared some pretty interesting stories there. However, if you have anything that's, maybe outside of the family constellations work that you would like to share, or that comes to mind as just a great, story, certainly we are all ears here and would love to hear it.
Okay, well, there is one rather interesting one. When Rupert Sheldrake and I decided to get married, we were staying in Wales, the sort of one of the Celtic parts of the British Isles, and there was an incredibly beautiful shrine to this Irish princess who'd become a kind of saint. Nearby, and it was this incredibly archaic chapel, and the story of this it was in this very interesting valley with a waterfall at the end, which was somehow like a sort of jagged sort of goddess waterfall. It was a very sort of powerful place, and there was the famous story was that this Irish princess had walked from Ireland and made this her place with her nuns, and the local prince was out hunting, and the hare that he was chasing hid itself in the skirts of the princess.
Oh wow!
And so he gave her this valley, and so there's a wonderful story around her. And in a chapel in those days, the two of them, the local prince and the saint, were lying side by side in these sort of medieval effigies, these stone figures with their hands together, joined by what was called the giant's rib, which was an enormous whalebone. Anyway, this whole valley for us at that point was extremely magical, and we decided to have a betrothal ceremony. We weren't sure whether to get married or not, and Jean Houston, who was a friend of ours, said, "Oh, we'll get betrothed first and see what happens." So we decided to get betrothed on her advice, and so we got this local vicar who also spoke English and Welsh, and we decided to have the ceremony at this little chapel. And so we had to get the key to this chapel from the gravedigger, the sextant, and the key was about a foot long or more. It was an ancient, huge key, rusty key. And off we went, and we opened the door of the church, and the Bible was already at the wedding ceremony. It was really uncanny. And then, but most of all was, I looked down at the effigy of the princess, and she and I were wearing identical dress.
Oh wow!
So that's my little story of synchronicity.
Whoa. Wow! Did you get full chills? Like,
oh yes, full chills.
Wow!
Yeah.
Do you think did you get any indicator or feeling that could be a reincarnation kind of situation, or?
I don't know. I mean, because of the work I do, I meet many people who talk about incarnation, and I've had all kinds of stories about who I was in previous lives, and what I've noticed is that they tend to relate to what I'm doing at the time. So I used to be the general editor of a whole series of books, and it was in my gift to get people to write books for me. And I remember this man who did past lives told me I'd been a patron in Venice in Renaissance, and because in a sense I was a patron, I was able to give people these books to write, and I've had many different versions of incarnations from people, but I don't know. We have enough with this life, I think.
For sure. I definitely can agree with that. I'm with you. I find it very interesting, and I've heard some interesting things myself, and it's like, well, maybe so. We'll find out, I guess,
Exactly.
So yeah. Well, this has been fascinating, Joe. You are such a gift, and so much wisdom and knowledge and fun to share. I so appreciate the work that you've done, and I know the listeners have thoroughly enjoyed this, and some will want to reach out, to possibly participate in some family constellation work. And maybe you can share your website one more time.
Sure. Yes. It's healingvoice.com. www.healingvoice.com. Healing voice is one word. And there are masses of information there, really masses, of videos and all kinds of things. Right up front at the homepage, the online workshop dates, and ways of contacting me. So it's good, if people want to work with me, to email me, and then I can tell them what's happening.
Wonderful. Well, I do have one final question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say info at Healing Voice is my
at healingvoice.com.
And and you can email me at info@healingvoice.com. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, one final question for you, and it is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Jill Purce?
The meaning of life. Ouch.
The meaning of life is ouch.
No. It's ouch is the question. It's difficult. It's such a difficult question. I don't feel I'm qualified to answer. I think it's to have a kind of exuberance and joy, and to flow with that which is living.
I love that.
It's a kind of joyful riding of the wave of life.
Yeah, I would say that is as a highly qualified answer as I've ever heard, and I've asked the question many times, so I so appreciate you, Jill. You are amazing. Thank you so much for all that you do, and all of you out there listening, thank you for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into this podcast and opening your heart to this information. It has been such a joy. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you about the game with the universe on our website. You can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time. And if you go to positivehead.com/universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and greatest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to spark the curiosity of friends and family by having them choose a number, so they'll hopefully go and check out their number as well, which I greatly appreciate because it helps us to spread the word about the podcast. Once again, the address is positivehead.com/universe. And as a quick reminder, if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them almost every day, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I cannot stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so. I have my favorite, the appleberry shake, at least 5 times a week. Once again, to learn more about the Purium transformation, go to positivehead.com/transformation. Or if you want to keep it simple and just try out my favorite, the appleberry shake, you can go straight over to ishoppurium.com and be sure to use code positivehead for 25% off. I'll spell that for you. It's ishoppurium.com, and be sure to use your Positive Head 25% coupon code.